One of the most common theories in the Five Nights at Freddy's community might be wrong. The theory being Molten Freddy is made up of the missing children incident kids, or MoltenMCI. What if Molten Freddy is made up of souls from a missing child incident, just not the one that we thought it was? Well, that's the theory I'm here to bake for you today. So Slices, let's get on our aprons and get to work. First, let's gather our ingredients. We know for a near fact that there are two distinct missing child incidents. In FNAF 1, we see the newspaper clippings hinting that at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, 5 children go missing. We also keep getting evidence about this as the franchise goes on. In FNAF 2, we get Go Go Go, a minigame where Foxy leaves Pirate Cove a couple times and then eventually meets 5 corpses. The only restaurant we know of with a Pirate's Cove is Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, which would put those corpses at the same location. In FNAF 3, we get allusions towards this with the Happiest Day minigame, where those 5 souls help a weaker, earlier soul, Evan, or the crying child, move on. In between nights, we even see cutscenes of William Afton disassembling the FNAF 1 animatronics. Granted, probably after the events of FNAF 1. Eventually, we see those 5 souls show back up right after they're all disassembled. Those souls then trap him into a springlock suit and he dies in a back room. We then see the spirits fade away. Finally, at the end of the game, we see the masks of the original 5 animatronics. If the game is played normally, they're lit up. But if you get the secret ending, you see the lights on the inside are dimmed out, implying that they've moved on. Furthermore, in Freddy Fazbear Pizzeria Simulator, we get this screen of 5 tombstones, each of them lining up perfectly on that FNAF 3 end screen. We also get names on the tombstones, presumably the names of the children who were killed and then stuffed into that respective animatronic. So clearly there's a missing children's incident at the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza involving 5 children who go missing, but really they're dead. William Afton kills them and stuffs them into animatronic suits. We know this. This isn't new. We've known most of this since FNAF 1. But where's there evidence of a second missing children incident? Where could it have even been? Well, the answer to both of those questions is in FNAF 2. Specifically, the FNAF 2 location, I believe it's called New Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, but I think that name is contested. I'll just call it the FNAF 2 location. During FNAF 2, one of the death minigames you can get is called Save Them. We explore the layout of the FNAF 2 location, finding 5 corpses along the way until we see the text, "You can't." So, within the same game of Go Go Go, where we see the first missing child incident in clearly the old Freddy Fazbear's Pizza restaurant, we see Save Them, clearly the new restaurant, but also with 5 corpses, implying that another murder happened here. Furthermore, these animatronics are acting very erratically, more so in Night 6, when we hear Phone Guy talking about someone who used the yellow suit in the back room, and then they all started acting wild. So much so that they might even attack children. That's practically unheard of besides the fun times. We get more confirmation that something happened in FNAF 3.
There's been somewhat of an investigation going on. We may end up having to close for a few days, I don't know. I want to emphasize, though, that it's really just a precaution. Fazbear Entertainment denies any wrongdoing. These things happen sometimes.
So clearly, Fazbear Entertainment is covering up something again. Now, this is contested in the community, but personally, I think it's incredibly likely that the toy animatronics are haunted. First off, most people who don't believe they are blame their erratic behavior on bad programming. But come on. Yes, there's a facial database for adults, but would bad programming lead them to crawl through vents, kill people, and crawl on the ceiling? Not to mention they have black eyes with white dots in the middle, a staple of haunted animatronics in the game prior. They can even do things they normally can't. Mangle crawls on the ceiling. This isn't something Mangle can do. We get confirmation of this in Special Delivery. One of the emails mentions a manager complaining to the staff that they can't build Mangle right. They have reports that Mangle used to crawl on the ceiling, but they can't figure it out. They keep saying that Mangle just can't do that. The reason Mangle could crawl on the ceiling is because it was possessed. There's no other explanation that makes sense. So I think it's incredibly likely that there's a missing children incident in the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location, and then when that restaurant closed down and the new one opened, William did it again, and there was a second missing children incident with 5 more kids. So if there's 2 missing children incidences? So if there's 2 missing children incidences, which one goes into Molten Freddy? Do any of them go into Molten Freddy? At this point, with the evidence we have, I feel like it's practically canon that you can trace back Molten Freddy and Scrap Baby all the way to the fun times. To be brief, a mixture of mismatched remnant is infused into the fun times, as alluded to by the Candy Cadet stories about 5 becoming 1.
The man could only afford 1 coffin. So he stitched the 5 bodies together to make one, and buried the child.
However, in that state, they're confused and erratic, so they want to feel more whole again and reform into Ennard. Eventually, they notice that Elizabeth is not only whole as a spirit, but also not one of them. So Elizabeth is able to make it out of Ennard as Scrap Baby, and Ennard becomes Molten Freddy. The two arrive at the FNAF 6 location and burn to a crisp, releasing their remnant and passing on. So that's the path from Fun Times to FNAF 6. The question becomes, where did the remnant come from to infuse into the Fun Times? In FNAF 3 on the Happiest Day minigame series, also through FNAF World for further confirmation, we see the original 5 missing children incident kids attempt to help Evan move on by giving him his happiest day, the birthday party he never got. I know it isn't confirmed that his name is Evan, and the evidence we have to prove that is pretty speculative at best, but it doesn't really mess with the lore if we get his name wrong, and Evan just feels better than Crying Child or Bite Victim of 83, so Evan it is. But when does this happen? Especially if the first missing children incident souls are trapped in the back room with Springtrap all this time. Well, I think it's very likely that in that last cutscene we see, the souls recognize each other for the first time. Think about it, they're all just floating there without any obstruction in the way. For a brief moment, they can see each other and that their murderer is gone, but before moving on, they notice that there's another lost and scared soul, Evan. So using the arcade machines that we see in the back room, they work together to attempt to recreate the party he deserved, to help him calm down and to help him pass on. Then, once their killer is dead and their friend passed on, they all find peace and move on as well. All except for Cassidy, the vengeful spirit, the one you should not have killed. He somehow senses that Afton is still alive and attaches himself to Afton like a leech, just to make sure that that bastard stays down. Unfortunately, years pass and Springtrap is set free by the haunted house guys, and with him, Cassidy. The question then becomes, if the missing children incident move on in that back room, what about the Fun Times? Where does their remnant come from? The current prevailing theory is that the Follow Me cutscenes show us this process. William takes apart the animatronics and collects what materials he can for remnant. There's however one issue with this. William dies at the end of Follow Me. If all these games happen consecutively, and we have no reason to doubt that they wouldn't, he'd collect the remnant, but then die and get trapped in the back room before being able to use it. More than that, when he's collecting the remnant, the souls from those animatronics leave the animatronics, so presumably the remnant would leave as well. Something that confuses it even more is the FNAF 6 grave shot. When we see this at the end of FNAF 6, it implies that that's when those souls move on. But how can that be if they've moved on already in the back of FNAF 1's location? Well, it could be alluding to the fact that that is when they get justice, as William Afton is finally burnt to a crisp. But that's hard to say. Frankly, the timeline is, we see these souls move on in a back room, then we see them move on via Happiest Day, and then we see them move on again with tombstones. There's gotta be something else happening here. What is the missing link that gives us remnant for the Fun Times and explains all these moving ons? FNAF 2. If possessed, the toy animatronics have no clear ending. All we know is that they're said to be disassembled at the end of FNAF 2. If that's the case, William could very likely be the one to take care of them and just bring them back to his bunker, melt them down, and infuse the Fun Times with them. After all, this would explain how he gets remnant before the Follow Me cutscenes. Seeing how the Fun Times don't quite work the way they're intended, he might think he just needs more remnant, so he goes back to the old Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria location and tries to get more. But unfortunately, well, fortunately for us, unfortunately for him, he dies. So he can't go back to his experiment, and that's why Michael has to go and finish the job. So what would this mean for the timeline? Well, let's put our mixture in the oven and see what kind of theory bakes out of it. William Afton kills and stuffs 5 children at the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, but doesn't seem to notice any observable movement. Before too long, the pizzeria shuts down and he loses access to those animatronics. Then, when new Freddy Fazbear's Pizza opens up, this time with a whole new set of animatronics, he starts taking apart the older models, but still nothing. So he decides to try killing again. This time, for whatever reason, it works. The children latch onto the nearby toy animatronics and start going berserk. His experiment was a success, but the repercussions were getting too much to handle. He needed to transport them to a safer location to observe them, in a more controlled environment. Luckily for him, the restaurant was closing down as well. He takes it upon himself to dispose of the toy animatronics for the company, instead bringing them to his bunker. There, he melts them down and infuses them into the Fun Times he created. Now every variable is accounted for. However, they're just as erratic as before, and seemingly unsure of what they are. He assumes he may need more remnant for the experiment, or even the old Spring Bonnie suit to help tame them. Luckily, a new version of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza is opening up, in the same old building, with the same old models. but refurbished. He waits until the restaurant is inevitably shut down, as they always are, and once the doors are boarded, he lures each of the original 5 animatronics into the back room and takes them apart, looking for traces of remnant. However, in doing so, he releases the souls that were trapped inside these suits, and they corner him into the old Spring Bonnie suit that he knew oh too well. He's snapped dead by the suit, and for the first time in a long while, the children's spirits see each other. As they're about to move on though, they notice one spirit who's too afraid and unaware of what's going on, Evan. They use the nearby arcade machines to make an environment where they can give him the happiest day he needs. Once done, he passes on, and seeing him settled and their murderer dead, most of the other spirits pass as well, all except for one, Cassidy. This spirit is outraged at what William has done, and wants to ensure his death, so he attaches himself to William like a leech, and watches in that case that William comes back. It's around this time that Michael makes his way to Sister Location. The rest of the timeline would occur as we already know it, except instead of the original missing children, it's the second one. So, Ennard forms of the souls of the second missing children incident. They scoop Michael and inhabit his body, they leave when they sense his body rotting away, and Ennard splits into Molten Freddy and Scrap Baby. Then eventually they both end up at Freddy Fazbear Pizzeria Simulator, and all burn until their remnant is all but gone. They've received their happiest days as well, leaving only a pile of agony-ridden machine behind. So, I like this theory. A lot, actually. But as my Tani pointed out in the bakery, the official Ritos Discord, where we post about FNAF stuff, games in general, talk about things, whatever we want. There's a Minecraft server, it's super fun, but it's 18+, you should totally join by clicking there. As my Tani said, there's a lot of holes in this theory. Not to say that there's... Oh, okay, bye. Not to say that there's evidence disproving that the second missing children incident kids are the ones that's in Ennard and then Molten Freddy, but more so, there's a lot of evidence supporting that it's the original missing children incident kids. I'll link the original Reddit post here, but one of the most compelling pieces of evidence is how much the original missing children show up in Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator. We see Susie about to get kidnapped, the gravestone illusion. We see Give Gifts Give Life during Henry's monologue while he's talking about the souls that are here. This game has a lot of references to the original missing children, but practically none to the second batch in FNAF 2. There's a lot more that kind of poke some holes in here, but just know that while my theory is very narratively satisfying, there are some holes in it, so I wouldn't go spouting it as fact. Although, something we can all agree on is that none of these souls, missing children incident 1 or 2, make it onto Security Breach. In fact, there aren't any souls in Security Breach besides William Afton. For why that is, go ahead and check out the video I made on it here. Shout out to the best patrons, The Toasted Slices, Emberisk, Zenith, Tommy Woodyard, Isle, Stormachow, Raven Eris, and Charlie Bean. And until next time, as always, stay toasty, Slices.